Welcome to the Lara Jane Layton Show. This podcast is for you, the person who keeps putting others first. Your self-talk has held you back. You no longer need to take a second seat. Let's explore ways to overcome self-doubt. You can silence that inner bully voice and achieve your full potential. Here's your host, Lara Jane.
Hello, listener. It's your host, Lara Jane, and I am here with a new best friend. His name is Reneau, and he is here to talk to us about our emotions and how we get those triggered. And I have lots of triggers. So, Reneau, I'm hoping you can help me kind of figure out a way to make those triggers not happen quite so often. So tell us, I know, and you have a new book coming out, and that is so exciting. So tell us about that too.
Well, the new book is called Why You Feel the Way You Do, and it's kind of a journey. Takes everything I've been studying over the last 40 years or so and puts it together. We start off with what are emotions? Why do we have them? Then we go into the whole issue of triggers and negative core response patterns and wrap up with 3 things that make people happy. So it's
so the same things we're going to kind of talk about today and more.
Yeah, it's a real fun ride. So it's fun to do the research again and get back into how things have changed over the last 20 years or so and just update myself. And so, yeah, I had a lot of fun writing it.
Oh, cool. So what are these emotions? I mean, I know most of mine are frustration, just like, get out of my way is kind of the one that I get triggered the most with.
Yeah. Well, when we talk about emotions, the neuroscientists, that they talk about affects, and affects are something that it's a wiring inside of you that makes you want to take some specific type of action. And so the most basic affects are your sensory affects. So heat, cold, pressure. If you're sitting there in the same position too long, then those circuits say you got to move. Or if you're too hot, they say you got to get cool. And then you have what are called the homeostatic affects. So that's just a fancy word for balance. And that keeps balance in your body. So hunger and thirst are the 2 big ones. You know, if you haven't eaten for a while, then that whatever else you're thinking about, pretty soon food comes into your thoughts, right? You want to eat something. So emotions are kind of the higher level affects, and they get intertwined with, of course, all of your beliefs and expectations and experiences. And there's the ones that everybody knows, you know, the anger and the fear, and those 2 are related to threat. If the threat is manageable, then we tend to get angry. And again, I use that in a very broad sense. So low level anger is irritation, right? High level anger is rage. So if, so you're stepping on my foot and I'll say, hey, get off my foot, and that's that wiring, that same wiring. It's just where the dial is turned up. That's causing you to assert yourself and take action. And if the threat is unmanageable, then you become anxious, or a high level of panic, of course, and I want to get away from it. I want to somehow not experience it. So that can be a roller coaster. It can be a relationship. It can be an interview, whatever. And then there's a couple that most people don't think of as emotions, but one is something called seeking. And if you look at any baby, any puppy, they want to explore the environment. There's just that urge to go out there and find out what's out there. If you're sitting in a room, somebody opens the door and walks in, everybody looks. And it's it's a circuit that wants to know, is it safe? Is it dangerous? Is there something out there? And then another one is something called the play circuit. And Panksepp, who worked with rats, he was known as the rat tickler. He could turn off all of the thinking parts of the brain, the higher levels of the rats still wanted to play.
He was known as the rat, R-A-T tickler.
He was famous because he found that when he tickled rats, if you record them and slow it down, it sounds like laughter.
No, okay. I just had never heard that before. So sorry I interrupted your flow, but
no. It's fine. Yeah. Jacques was really he died a few years back, but that was his big claim to fame. And then he was the one that kind of started the what's called the affective neuroscience, emotions, as opposed to the cognitive neuroscience, which has to do with thinking, hearing, that type of stuff. So his nickname was the rat tickler. But and these rats would want to play. And again, when you look at all mammals, including us, that's how young mammals learn limits. I'm babysitting my 3.5-year-old great granddaughter. And, we play, and sooner or later she does too much or goes too far. And so it's okay. That's the limit. And as adults, we still want to have that urge to interact and to play. And that's why we like to, to just joke with each other and do things that are fun. Part of what binds us together as well. And it turns out that we have actually two fear circuits. In addition to the fear circuit for danger, there's the separation anxiety in children. And that's the counterpoint to that is something called the caring circuit. And so that's part of what binds us as we get older. And again, all of these basic circuits will become what they call the secondary emotions, like, pride or embarrassment, shame, love, those types of things. And so they're the foundation of those other emotions we find in people. And of course, there's the lust circuit. We all know about that. That gets activated in puberty, right?
I think that would be the romantic love circuit.
Well, it's
because there's lots of kinds of love.
Well, the lust circuit is more the physical side. The caring circuit is the other side. So
okay,
is more the emotional love. So 4 of those have to do with the relationship, right? The separation anxiety, where we miss people when they're gone, and as an adults, right? With children, of course, they get really agitated. The caring circuit, which binds us, the play circuit, all these things kind of work to make that relational aspect of people a very core thing for happiness. So one of the things that's often missing in people today, they don't have that that deep, intimate relationship where they can be transparent with people. So, but it's a basic human need. So the way the emotions work too, another aspect of them that often people aren't aware of, it's the way your brain sorts information. It's kind of an indexing system for the brain. So the brain is always making associations. In fact, most of what's going on is unconscious. During the day, very small amount of your brain is actually consciously aware of what's going on. Most of the stuff is going on at an unconscious level. So when I'm walking down the street, my brain at an unconscious level is looking for any association for something that might cause danger or something that might get in my way. A truck goes by or whatever, I become aware of it. But that's all this activity is happening at an unconscious level. So you get these associations, and if it's important, it gets an emotional tag. And that's kind of how it sorts out what's important from what's not important, which is why experiential learning is better than just book learning. I can read everything there is to know about a car and how to drive it. But until I get behind the wheel, then my brain can start, oh, that didn't work. Oh, this feels good. Now I can make associations through that emotional indexing so that now I can take over and I can listen to the radio. I can talk to somebody. I can think about what I'm going to watch on TV or whatever that night. And the brain is able now to use that information in a coherent sense. So emotions are very important for sorting information. And of course, that's where the negative triggers and stuff comes into play, because sometimes normal things get associated with danger or bad stuff. Probably the most stark indication or example of that would be, PTSD, where people have experienced trauma, whether it's warfare, childhood trauma or whatever. And so now things that are normally safe have been now identified as danger. Probably a good example would be a lady I worked with who at work, her supervisor sounded and had a lot of mannerisms similar to an abusive parent. So she found when she was around him, she would freeze up, she'd get anxious, she had a hard time, contributing in meetings just because of that triggering of him. And let me sidetrack for just a moment. Nowadays we have people say, well, we need to have safe zones and we need to not be triggered by people. And I think that's a misguided goal. It's better to quiet the triggers. And so to be able to go where you want to go and do what you want to do and not experience the extreme trigger, but manage it so that now I can live my life in a variety of situations. But anyway,
that so much speaks to what I've been trying to do for me. How do we turn the trigger off? Because I don't want to have to separate or change what I'm doing just because something started to trigger me. I want to be able to soften the response to instead of getting really frustrated. So this is exciting.
Well, for her, what we did, and again, since it was a single type of triggering situation, I use what I call the what's happening, what's real approach. And so she would say, what's happening, what's real, and then distract herself. So what's happening, and we composed it down in a little card that she memorized. So what's happening is he looks and sounds like my abusive parent. What's real is he's not. I'm safe now. I'm an adult. We're just going to go in and talk about the weekly schedule. And with practice, and then she would focus on what she needed to do that day after that. And with practice, she desensitized to him, because what you're really doing is you're desensitizing to situations. And desensitization is a term for where you become comfortable with something that's making you anxious. Like if I'm working with somebody with a water phobia, we start with just, again, tools to manage the anxiety, tools, like breathing tools, relaxation response, things to cope with the self-talk. I had one lady who had her brothers, when she was a little, told her there were piranhas in the swimming pool and they would eat her toes. And so she became, siblings are great for business, right?
Oh, yes. I'm
anyway,
sure.
but it worked. It developed into this phobia of water. And what happens is the thinking part of the brain shuts off. And so there's just this emotional reaction, water, I got to get away. And so you have to re-engage the thinking part of the brain and make a new association through desensitization. So we start practicing sitting next to the water, reading a book. She would tell herself, again, what's happening? Well, this is a conditioned response pattern from when my brothers told me those stupid things about the water, which were not true, were never true. I was always safe. I'm safe right now. I'm just sitting next to the pool. Eventually get to where she could put her feet into the pool. And then, I got to the point where she was actually comfortably in the pool because she wanted to, that's something she wanted, a goal she wanted. Because I should mention, you don't need to desensitize to everything. I do not particularly want to skydive. Don't need to. So I just don't worry about it, right? So you just go through a process of desensitization of those areas of your life that are interfering with your ability to live comfortably and do the things you want to do. It's, if I have a fear of flying, I fly maybe once every 4 or 5 years. Go get a Xanax or something, handle it that way. If I'm a pilot, then I probably need to go through a desensitization process. By the way,
I think you would have tried to be a pilot if you were afraid of flying.
Well, actually, the Air Force has the best fear of flying program in the world, because if you got a pilot who's had a burnout or something and he's gotten anxious, you want to get him back into that seat very quickly.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Air lives would be number 2. My brother was in fact, I used a couple other people in the book. He was hit by lightning, his plane, and it's like this, this tremendous crash. And so, of course, that sets up again the next flight. You get nervous, right? Mm-hmm. And again, 2 examples. One person, they handle it again with the what's happening, what's real. Well, this is just because that last flight, I was safe. We landed, nothing happened. I'm going to be okay on this flight. Let me think about what I need to take on my trip. If you react instead, oh my gosh, that was terrible, I almost died. What if it happens again? I don't know if I'm going to be able to stand it. The self-talk escalates the trigger, now it becomes even stronger. And so that association. And that indeed is why people continue with these triggers, is because they tend to feed into them with their self-talk. So they never go through the desensitization process. They're actually resensitizing themselves every time it comes up. So how you react to a trigger is very important. Again, that's why what's happening, telling yourself what's real, because again, that conscious part of your brain, when the emotion comes up, tends to shut down. So you got to re-engage it so you can go through that desensitization process, as opposed to, oh my God, I got to get away. I got to get away. This is terrible. A couple other things that people often do, getting into this whole idea of emotional reasoning. I worked a lot with panic disorder, and people had panic attacks. And one of the fears that they often had was the fear of passing out, because they would hyperventilate when they would have a panic attack, right? So they get a little bit lightheaded. And so that fear was often very strong. So I would ask them, okay, we're going to practice going into the store. What are the odds that you might pass out? Oh, maybe 50%. So then the next question is, how often have you passed out in your life? I've never passed out. So based on emotional reasoning, the odds were very high. based on reality, the odds were low. So this is something that people often do with emotional reasoning, is they overestimate how likely something's going to happen, whatever the fear is. And then the next step is, okay, if you were to pass out in the store, how bad would that be on a scale of 1 to 10? Oh, that'd probably be a 15 or a 20, right? It's the worst thing I can imagine. Okay, so let's think about maybe getting your arm cut off or having your kid die or having a wasting disease. If that's a 10, how bad would passing out actually be, since there's no harm other than some embarrassment when you come to? Well, now it goes way down the scale, right? So people will tend to overestimate the awfulness of whatever it is that they're thinking about, the trigger or the fear. So learning to have a more realistic estimation of how likely, based upon, my past experience, and then how bad would it really be? And then you go to the next 2 steps, which people who do this kind of emotional reasoning never get to. What can I do to prevent passing out? Well, I got my breathing techniques. I can, have all these other things I can do. And if I were to pass out, what could I do? Well, I want to sit down, have something to say. So we'd actually rehearse what could you say? Well, I'm okay. Just been not feeling too good lately. Don't call anybody. Just let me sit for a minute and I'll go home. I'm fine. Something of that nature. So anything of that nature, any what if, what we call negative anticipation, what if thinking that people do, you would handle those 4 steps. What are the odds? Realistically, how bad would it actually be? What can I do to prevent it? And which they never get to. And how would I cope with it if it were to happen? And you can do that with any fear coming up. And people who deal with adversity and fear well, they tend to automatically go through those steps. And that just seems to be part of a normal thinking. If you were raised in a family where the opposite was demonstrated, you had parents or family members who tended to exaggerate the awfulness and all that type of stuff and do that emotional reasoning, then that oftentimes becomes, again, a habit pattern. So training yourself to think differently about those what ifs becomes very, very important. Whether it's a test coming up or an interview or a meeting or whatever, you can go through those steps.
Okay, I think I'm liking this, but I still am not clear. I can say, okay, why is this happening? And I can kind of figure it out, or, what is it real or not?
Yeah.
But I'm still wondering how I actually change, because the trigger is going to be there. And let's say we're in the corporate environment. Well, wait, let's first take a break.
Okay.
And get a word from our sponsor. And when we come back, I'm going to ask you, let's kind of frame this in a corporate working environment and
Sure.
the kind of standard fears that we have there and the things that trigger us. And so we're going to be just right back.
This podcast is sponsored by Lara Jane Coaching. You're ready to silence your inner bully voice. Let Lara Jane support you with coaching. To schedule an introduction call, go to larajanelayton.com.
So Reneau, I am so excited because I know that I had panic attacks. I have had, anxiety. I wanted to call it PSD, but I don't know, because it's so, I'm just a person. I couldn't have PSTD. But some of the things in the corporate world that triggered me were rude people that just get anything that would make me not be as productive as I wanted to be, whether it was a
Right.
person or things that shot up in the middle of the day that took over my life, like, oh, great, now I have to change gears. Now I'm not going to get my stuff down. And those are the things that caused panic. And I'm not sure how I could probably reason once I had the trigger, but is there any way to just somehow soften the trigger itself?
It sounds like there's some what we call should must thinking going on underneath it. Having an expectation about the way things should be.
Oh yeah.
And they're not. And again, this is something that's very common for people, both with anxiety and anger, is when their should must rules get broken. And part of it is if you listen to people talk and in your self-talk inside your head, a person often will be thinking, well, this person should be polite. I don't understand why they're not polite. I mean, this is terrible. Why is this person acting this way? And people often will go into what we call circular why questioning. The reality is not matching the way they want it to be. And rather than saying, well, this person's rude, what am I going to do about it? They get stuck with, oh my gosh, this is terrible. Why is this happening? Right. So part of it is training yourself when you catch yourself doing that to identify what should be happening here.
I should be responding differently because I can't change anybody but me.
But also thinking about reality, what's happening out there that is, violating the way things should be. I mean, that's underlying it. So, this person is being rude and he's upsetting my schedule. He should be productive. He should be polite. He should be, managing things well, but he's not. So let me focus on what I'm going to do about it. See, and that's where people don't get to because they get stuck with that. How could this be happening? This is terrible. Why is this happening? I don't like it. It's adopting that idea that life is a series of choices, and you choose things that are either going to enhance or prevent you from having some bad stuff. At school, when I was teaching, I tell the students, well, you don't have to come to school, and so they say, well, you have to. I have to come to school. Why? Well, because if I know I'm going to not pass, then I won't get my job and blah, blah, blah. Well, okay, so you're choosing to come to school. And so changing from I have to I choose to, because when you have a lot of should, must in your life, it's like there's this invisible parent, because that's where we get our stuff, right? When we're little, and they're following you around, making you do stuff you don't want to do, right? So when you start to say, no, it's not that I have to, I'm choosing to, or I want to. And you kind of take the power back, because when there's a lot of that should must stuff going on in the background, it's like, again, your power is outside of you. You've got these external forces making you do stuff, as opposed to I'm choosing. Now it feels different. I may be doing the exact same thing. And so this person is being rude. I wish I was on my schedule, but I'm not. So what am I going to do about it? I don't, the world is different from the way I want it to be. I would sometimes use the absurd example, this chair should be green, but it's brown. I don't understand. Why is this chair green? Why, this is stupid. And it should be green, but it's brown. Why, again, it's brown.
It's just a chair.
And what, so I can paint it.
Just a rude person.
I can paint it. I can remove it, Yeah, it's just a rude person, right? And, it's a way of training yourself to think differently. And a lot of times what I do is I'd have people, okay, take a few minutes every few days and look back to situations where you got upset, and let's write down what was going on inside your head. What were you thinking? And then you look for those types of what we call distorted thinking. It's like should, must thinking. That's a real big one. And again, the circular why questioning is the hidden form of it, right? Whenever you're doing that, how come, why was that person acting that way? I don't understand it. Again, there's that should, must reason that people should be fair and kind and, watch out for my schedule. That's not the reality, right? People got a lot of insensitive clods out there.
It's really, I know that a lot of people struggle with finding that work-home balance. And when some of these things come at you, you are having to choose between working extra hours or being home.
Right.
And the overall choice is I need to stay employed. I need money. I need to provide.
Yep.
And so you start having that anxiety, but now I got to work late again. And I should provide for my family.
Yeah.
I should be home with my family.
Yeah.
But I have to work to provide. And so how do you make that balance where, it's kind of an emotional
well, it's real though. I mean, you do have to make choices, and sometimes it's a matter of really sitting down. And if you've got a lot of free floating anxiety or anger coming up, a lot of times that's a message that maybe you need to pay attention and make some different choices. It may be that, and you may not be able to do that right away, but it may be that this line of work or this position is not where I need to be. Maybe I need to take a lateral position. Maybe I need to, go someplace else. Maybe some of the goals I've had about where I want to be don't fit with some of my other goals in terms of my personal life and family. So we're really talking about doing an analysis of what do I really want out of life and how do I balance? And maybe I need to make some different choices. And again, that can be difficult. Sometimes it helps to, if you've got a mate, sometimes it helps to sit down and talk with them about it. And decide, where do we want to go? Maybe I do need to go into a different position or different line of work, or just not push for that other position. I know when I was at school, I said, I don't want to be in management. I love being Lord of the classroom. That's as far as I want to go.
Yeah. Once I was a vice president, and when I left that role, it was like, I will never do this again. It's not for me. I don't handle people always second guessing what you're doing very well. So it's like, let me take a step back and do things that don't have that backstabby questioning kind of thing. The people that are out there in those roles, I love them. They're amazing. Please keep the roles.
And again, so we're talking about choices in terms of what's important to you in life. And what you just said is so beautiful, because sometimes people need to look at, is it worth being there to what I'm sacrificing over here? And sometimes that balance is, you have to go too far to find it sometimes.
Yeah.
To realize this is not where I need to be. I mean, that's something I've done a number of times in my life. I realized this is not where I want to be. I'm going to make some different choices. And it's sometimes difficult to do.
It is, because there's a lot of prioritization that you have to evaluate in your life and decide what is really my top priority. And is it status? Is it money? Is it contentment? And until I don't know if I can make a valid choice until I've identified my priorities. And once I do that, then I can start evaluating them. This blog isn't even close to being done yet, but in the corporate world, we do this cost benefit analysis.
Right.
And it's like, why are we not adding our emotions and our personal needs in that cost benefit analysis and use it in our personal lives? I am more content in this. I have less stress, less triggers that are hitting me are part of the cost or benefit of something. And it's a great tool, but we don't use it anything other than monetarily. And it's like, there are so many other costs in this world.
Yep. And I did a lot of that with clients, exactly that cost benefit analysis. In fact, we would just get the old piece of paper out and, what are we sacrificing and what are we gaining? Right.
Yeah. Or the pro con.
And relationship is sometimes ignored. People sometimes get so focused on, monetary success or position, and recognizing that those emotions we talked about, big chunk of them have to do with connecting with other people. And it used to be people had lots of rich connections. You lived in the same, village, or you had the block or extended family. And that's, I think, one of the prices a lot of times realize they pay when they relocate to a new city or something. And so I'm now isolated and I don't have that connection. And so figuring out, how do I get those connections to make me able to manage this other part of my life becomes a challenge. And people go through their entire day sometimes without a single meaningful connection with another human being. And that will make you crazy after a while, because you'll keep shoving other things into that hole, that need for connection. That's why
solitary confinement works so well. People can't live in solitude. Yes, there are the hermits out there that live just fine, but it works well because we need connection.
Yep. And so that's when you're doing your cost benefit analysis. I think that's something to keep in mind is, am I feeding that other side of myself, that part that needs to have connection? Because if you don't, then eventually it's going to affect all the other areas of your life. And again, people have different needs in that area, and depending upon how you're wired and your past experience, you can find that through different ways.
I love that. I had to write it down.
I mean, some people find it through, organizations, service, and they develop a rich relationships through that type of a thing. Church, social organizations, some people have a biking club or something, and they have people within that they're very close to. I have a small group that we've been meeting for 20 years, and, we know each other really well and can rely on each other. My wife was out of town a few weeks ago. I needed to go down to the ER, so I called up a guy. He took me right down, and just having that type of support makes such a difference in your life. And unfortunately, so many people don't have it because their focus is in just this one area. I need to climb the corporate ladder, or I need to, have more money. I have to have all these things, and ultimately, those things are not going to satisfy you. I mean, I think of that one millionaire that's spending, millions of dollars to live forever. What an empty life,
Yeah. Wouldn't you? I wouldn't. If I had an empty life, I wouldn't want to live forever. I would want to be done.
but people get so focused on, that type of thing, and they just fail to realize that I am out of balance.
Purpose. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's something to give me purpose.
Yeah.
So
second thing that makes people happy is purpose, right?
Yes.
Relationship, purpose, and meaning. Those are the three big things.
Okay. I could go there.
Yeah.
I agree. So we've talked about our emotions and the different types. We've talked about the triggers, and we've talked a little bit about how we can soften those triggers by, like, is this real? Is this, if I fainted, what would be the problem with that? So we've kind of talked through those, and we are at the end of our 30 minutes. But
and let me just emphasize that when you're talking about what's real, it's important to specify where it's coming from.
Yes, because
that allows you to focus on where you're going to, or what you need to do.
Yes. And kind of like when you said her boss sounded like an abusive parent.
Yep.
He's not that.
Yep.
So just getting us back to that feeling of safety.
Mm-hmm.
So I would love to have you just succinctly summarize or give us another tidbit that we haven't heard yet. And is your book out now?
Yeah, it's in paper, ebook, and audio. So
okay, and is it on Amazon?
It's on Amazon. Yeah.
Okay.
Or you can go to my website.
I'll let you tell them one more time what the name of your book is, so in case they didn't write it down the first time, because sometimes we don't know how much we're going to love you until after you've talked.
Right.
And so we don't wait. I didn't write it down because I thought that was going to be.
Yes. Love me. I need a relationship. Yeah. It's why you feel the way you do. And easiest place to find it is at whyemotions.com, whyemotions.com. And you can find all my stuff and YouTube links and, all kinds of links to the different material there. I got a lot of freebie stuff people can do.
Right. And listener, all of that is in our show notes already. So you can just jump down in there if you didn't write it down. So I am not a medical professional, listener. I'm here for entertainment, and I love it when I get to talk with a mental professional that has got so much knowledge in an area that I feel is correct and I move towards, but I love knowing there's science and facts behind it. So I super appreciate you coming on. And if you do want to give us a last bit of wisdom, it's all you.
Well, things like my book have a lot of things that people can do, but if you're feeling overwhelmed and, you just really are having difficulty functioning in some level of your life, find some help. There's a lot of help out there, a lot of people that know what they're doing, some that don't. So you got to kind of sometimes look around for them. And if you're in a place where you don't have people physically close, there's a lot of internet help nowadays. So I would encourage people to, if you're struggling in some area of your life, don't sit there struggling, get some help.
And there is no shame in getting help.
Yep.
I don't know why in the past there's been such a stigma against it, but we all can use help, whether it's a counselor or a coach or a friend
Mhm.
or the internet, if all
Right.
else is not there. So there is nothing wrong with getting support and having those loved ones around you be there. So thank you, Reneau. I really, really appreciate you coming on. And listeners, stay tuned for our next episode.
Are you tired of waking up exhausted? You are not alone. If you're looking to take your life back, let's start with the simple step of adjusting your self-talk. Stay tuned for the next episode with your host, Lara Jane. Remember to follow the show so you don't miss a next simple step that you can use to feel more confident. And please leave an honest review.